Hey there, it's Katie Jarvis with Managing the Mess. I'm a K through 6 elementary art teacher, and I teach here at a Title I school just outside of Washington, D.C. As I'm making this video, I am this close to summer, and I have a recommendation for you of something that I like to do in those first, few weeks of summer, and that is to write down a reflection about this past school year, and actually physically write it out, not just kind of think about things in your head. So over on Teachers Pay Teachers, I'm going to put a freebie that's going to go along with this video that you can use as a reflection. You just want to go ahead and fill it out, and then you're going to just kind of forget about it until the fall when you pull it out. And then I think you're going to find having gone through this will be very helpful and beneficial to you. The first thing I recommend that you do is write down all of the things that you're anxious and worried about for the next school year. This just helps me to feel a little bit more settled, to just get all my feelings out on paper. And I'm always surprised at the things that I was worried about at the beginning of summer versus we get to school starting up again. I realize that some of them have already been resolved. Like I'm like, oh, I don't have to worry about this anymore. Okay, look, I don't have to worry about that. And you just kind of see it all coming together. But it's nice to get all those worries kind of out so you're not like thinking about this all summer. For me, things I'm worried about, always worried about, the schedule. I think as a specialist, this is like our whole world and existence. I always get super nervous about planning time. I love to do extra things for my students and go above and beyond. But when you really don't have time in the school day, it is very, very, very tough. I, this year, stayed probably later than I have in the past. And I want to be able to set limits on that and have time to leave school at an appropriate time when it's still light out and go to the gym and other things that are important to me. So I get anxious not knowing what that schedule is and how that's all going to fit together in my life. Also, next school year, we have a new principal coming to our school. We don't know who it is yet, but I'm excited for that new opportunity. But also that comes with a lot of uncertainties of what expectations that principal would have and that they don't really know you and you don't really know them. So there's not that whole back and forth that might be there with a principal that you've worked with or that hired you. The whole issue of juggling it all is a worry. I really want to keep up with my YouTube channel, Managing the Mess. I started putting things on Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm really having fun over on Instagram. But I'm also a teacher and I'm also a mom and I'm also a wife, and all that kind of juggling and making that work, giving each piece of the pie the appropriate amount of time and attention, definitely a worry. And I won't have my daughter here at school next year. So a little bit of worry is that she'll be at the middle school and I'll be here, and how will that routine and things work for picking her up after school and that type of a thing is a little bit of a worry. So I'm going to record all of those things down again and then look at that in the fall and then reflect on where I am at with those things. If any of those things I have a different outlook about when some time has passed. Take some time to reflect upon things that went well this year and things that didn't go so well. Think about things that you let go of or kind of let slide, different systems and things in your room maybe, and things you might want to add in for next year. So an example of this is something that I want to drop is keeping track of my daily effort grades on my seating chart. I used to think this was the most amazing idea. I made my seating chart on a little folder. It has a little spot for each person's name and their seat number, and that has all these little squares where I would write in their effort grade from that week. I used to be able to keep up with this. It started to be that I wouldn't let myself leave until these were done, and I was accomplishing that. But then very quickly this year, it just became really difficult. I found that I'd be throwing them in my bag and taking them home. And then, sometimes it would be the weekend and then I would be having to go back and do all of them. I tried to start bringing them with me at the end of the day because I have a duty. And I thought, well, just scoop up all the grade books from that day. And any that I didn't get done, I will fill them in then. Then I started realizing that was kind of a really good time to reflect on the day and think like, okay, what kind of things do I need to add to my to-do list before I leave for the night? And it wasn't that much time. So this is something that's got to go. What I want to add in place is I need to come up with a new and improved seating chart. I don't need to keep track of those daily effort grades in the way that I was doing because it was a bit redundant. Inside of my seating chart folder, I have a behavior log. So we give an effort grade for art, 4, 3, 2, 1. Anytime I wasn't giving somebody a 4, I was recording what happened here to track it. So I didn't really need those numbers to see that pattern there. If I saw their name inside here, I knew it wasn't a 4. I could look, over the weeks, how many times did this happen in that quarter? So maybe what I need to do on this record sheet is kind of to denote what quarter it is. I don't know that that's something that I ever really did in the past. Really just said date, name, and kind of like I would list out what happened. So that could be something I could do to improve that log, and I could add that up on my Teachers Pay Teachers too, as part of my behavior management packs. One thing that I do have on Teachers Pay Teachers is my art support report. This is something that I kind of revamped this year, so something sort of added in that I just made it look a little bit nicer, but it's a communication tool between myself and the classroom teacher to let them know about what happened during art. So if something's getting recorded here that I'm lowering an effort grade, or if somebody loses a tooth, or if somebody leaves early, anything like that, then I need to let the classroom teacher know. I'm noting that here. It doesn't mean that the classroom teacher is doing anything about it. I am still taking the lead on that, and I'm sharing what I'm doing. It just is that communication piece. It lets them know how I am taking care of it. I got really good feedback about that. Again, this year, it's been a really strong thing in my program for many years. And so that's something I definitely want to keep. Something that did not last long for me this year is I've always in the past had a chart where I kept charge of the gold or silver paintbrush, like what each class earned. So the class name was up there, and then there were little gold and silver stars. And, at back to school season every year, I'd go and buy a shiny new chart. And eventually over time, I sort of would give up on the chart. This year, I just was like, why am I doing this? I don't have time to record this gold or silver paintbrush. For my classes, it doesn't even mean anything in the fact that no matter what, they get the incentive that I do, which is a ketchup and pickle day at the end of the quarter. Doesn't matter how many paintbrushes you get. I don't do a party after 5 or anything like that. So for me, it just was something that I was doing that didn't really matter. And I'm definitely not even going to buy that silly little chart when I go into the next year. Grading was tough for me this year. I didn't have big blocks of planning time where I could just sit down and listen to a YouTube video or music and just go through all my grading like I had in the past. So one thing that I had played around with doing is putting a little dry erase pouch onto my seating chart folders and then going around and grading things as students are working. And I think if I had a different seating chart format that would work even better. I could leave a little space, and then when I slide the plastic cover on there, I could write it right in the space that I denoted underneath that student's name for the day. And I think that could really help me to enter the grades faster, not have to chase down, different artwork that's in different stages of being done and all of that. Again, with the theme of time, I really do need to start working on getting some volunteers, whether that is 5th and 6th graders in my building, just kind of using them a little bit more to get things done, or parent volunteers and community members that want to volunteer in my art room. I really need to take advantage of that. Something I did in the past definitely has went away for a little while with COVID, but is something that I need to bring back in. I'm also kind of tossing around the idea of having a student teacher for the coming school year. So that's something I want to look into and get more information about. I've had observers in the past from the local colleges, so I need to kind of get a little bit more information on that, but that's something I might want to add in for next year too. I'm really passionate about art room management, and something I've been doing for the last few years is taking some time at the beginning of summer and writing down all of my classroom rules. I go for my art room rules at the beginning of art each and every week. So my students really know them, and I've got them on top of mind quite often and refer to them when a student or a class is breaking the rules. For my rule number 1, listen when the teacher is talking. I think about that rule, about how it went this year. I feel like this went really, really well. Uh, I have a video about how I promoted good listening in my classroom and students interrupting. And I just really tried my hardest to stay on top of those things. I would say the grade level that I need to work on the most with that is kindergarten. In kindergarten, there's often an instructional assistant in the room during the whole class. And sometimes the kids would just like get up off the carpet during my lesson and like loudly talk to them. And the person would loudly talk back to them. And another person would get up, and it was a bit much. So I really never stopped and addressed what should they be getting up for? What should they not be getting up for? And modeling to my instructional assistant and to my students, if you had to talk while Mrs. Jarvis is giving the lesson to the other adult in the room, what would that noise level look like? Because it got to be kind of distracting to me, and I'm sure to the other learners. So it's something I'll be thinking about when I'm planning my instruction those first few weeks of school next year. Number 2, follow directions quickly. My students were pretty motivated this year. Nothing really comes to mind when I think about that with something I'd want to improve. I feel like it's going pretty well. Number 3, work quietly. This year, I really pushed podcast. This summer, I want to kind of reflect on more things that they could listen to for podcast to keep things kind of fresh and new. Maybe some more things like little songs and things for first graders to have smaller focused blocks so that they can work up to longer blocks when they come into art and they're older. But that's something that I think improved this year for me, but I want to keep on improving it. If you're curious about the podcast that we listen to in art, I've got a video about that. I'm going to link a lot of things in the description down below that you can look at this summer and get more ideas. Rule number 4, raise your hand. That went much better this year. I just stayed on top of them. So I don't think there's anything I'm going to do differently with that next year. One thing that I know that I made myself do is I stopped like after winter break, and I retaught like raising your hand and that whole thing that I did at the beginning of the year again. And that made a difference with my students' behavior. So at the beginning of the year, I went really slow and taught these routines. I went kind of slow when we came back from winter break. I touched on this again like after spring break, and it made a difference, especially with the hand raising. Number 5, making smart choices. Okay, this is the one where you can think of like all the crazy things that have happened this year. I'm trying to think of themes. With the older kids, I think something that I didn't teach explicitly, just kind of assumed, it's a school rule, it's common sense, was language. I thankfully, to my face at least, don't remember being called a bad word or name, but there was some name calling, like calling somebody a racist, calling somebody stupid, the kind of things like that, some other inappropriate language, or using a word that was inappropriate to another household. So that's something I want to teach and be a little bit more clear about. A connection I can make to that is, I know when we do a project with the 5th graders, and they make a shoe. They make these little mini people on the shoe, kind of climbing around and exploring. And I have a simple slide that shows all these different weapons, crossed out, blood, crossed out. We don't make these things at school. Same thing with language. I need to be like, in the art room, we're about positive talk. We're not saying inappropriate words. We're not calling people names. If there is a problem, you're coming to the teacher for help. You're not resorting to using any of those types of words. But something I definitely want to hit home more next year, because I don't want to be writing that. At the end of my art classes, I have a communication tool that I use to communicate things to the classroom teacher. And I feel like the language thing kind of like picked up more as the year went on. And it's something I never really stopped and talked to everybody about, that expectation. So I'm going in with that one the beginning of next year with my upper grades. With the lower grades, I feel like it was running. Like kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade would like be like a dog or something. Just like get the zoomies and all of a sudden just like randomly just run to go get scissors or something like that. I wished at times that I had a speed bump in my art room. But when I think about it, I didn't go over not running. Very often. I have an example with what I show. I show a video to my students at the beginning of the year where I show them what to do with these rules and what not to do, and I act that out. And within that, there's also a little video that I show them about my behavior management plan. But it's a lot for kindergartners to sit through, so I don't really think I showed that to kindergarten, but I had like an American Girl doll like running, and I give them a first warning, and I show like what happens when you don't follow the rules. It's a little bit different in kindergarten because you've got two different teachers. The IA is in there, I'm in there. You know, they get a little more chances because they're learning stuff. So I don't think that I showed them that, but I definitely want to add something in where they're seeing a demonstration of what can happen if you run, and kind of seeing the consequences and seeing it within the art room, that this isn't an acceptable thing. I know that they're excited and they're engaged and they're just, you know, wanting to get back to their spot and get back to work with those materials, but it's something for safety. There's definitely just not enough room to be running around here. Number 6 is clean up after yourself. When I'm thinking about that rule, my classes did pretty well with this year, but I want to give them more responsibilities and take things off of me, especially my older students. But I also kind of want to be a stickler with the younger kids, really teaching them to be able to do more, and to help maybe even, you know, sort of set things up for the next crew coming in. I do really like my cleanup routine. So if that's something that brings you some stress when you think about that in your art room, make sure you check out my video about that. I definitely would be sitting in, observations and be thinking to myself, I hope that they leave before we clean up, because I didn't want my administrators to see that cleanup. But now I've really got a good routine where I'm like, oh, I hope they stay. Like, we've really got this down. My students do know what to do, and it really does move through quite smoothly. But I think I'm ready to give them a little bit more responsibilities. I was even thinking about things like when they put the paintbrushes away, I had them put it in this paintbrush hot tub. Like, what if we had all the paintbrushes' hair facing the same way? Like, what if there was a sign? Because that would make them faster. I kind of rinse them and wash them all at once. That's sort of just my system. But if they were all facing the same way, it would make my life a little bit easier. So I need to kind of think about that a little bit more over the summer. But that's the kind of thing you just kind of want to get out of your head. What were the problems from this year? And then you can think about the solutions as the summer progresses. Take some time to think about what projects you did this year. Which ones were great? Which ones do you want to do again? Which ones were kind of flops that you should drop? And think about what your goals are for the next school year. What are the kind of projects that you want to add? I know for me this year, I didn't take a lot of chances with new projects because of time. I kind of stuck with my old faithful lessons. When I add a new lesson, I like to have slides. I like to have pictures of the steps. I like to make a video. I like to make an example. I like to have an objective poster. It's kind of a lot. And I'm also kind of starting to reach more and more for lessons that give my students a choice and a voice and have more creative results with a lot of different solutions versus everybody make a rainbow. It looks just like this. Your rainbow should look just like this. And those lessons, I like to give my students a lot of different resources to use. So those lessons just take me a little bit more time. So over the summer, I kind of want to look and get some new ones just to kind of keep things fresh and exciting for me. Another thing I reflect on in the summer is, how did I spend my own money in my classroom? One thing you could do is add some things to your supply orders, things that you can think of that you spent your own money on. One thing I thought of was lamination pouches. I have a personal laminator and I use it often for student handouts. So that's something I can probably tag on to my supply order that I'm about to place. Also think about, what could you have asked parents to donate? And I do this in 2 different ways. I have an Amazon wish list where I have different items that parents can donate, and then they just send it directly to the school. Another thing I do is I send a double-sided photo ready options of things that people could donate to the art room. So this would have things like egg cartons. It would have things like Greek yogurt cups that we would like to have, that people don't have to spend any money on. They're just, collecting their recycling and being kind to bring it in for us. But I also include things that would really make my job easier, like baby wipes for students to clean up with, paper towels, like real paper towels. Change your life to have these in your art room when there is a spill. This past year, I added in plastic tablecloths. I had back to back classes, and covering tables made a huge difference for me. So that's something I'm going to keep on that list again. I do have it editable and over on my Teachers Pay Teachers, if that's something that you want to check out and would make things a little bit easier for you for next school year. I hope you have a wonderful summer, and don't forget to go over to Teachers Pay Teachers, get that little worksheet, reflect on how this past year went, and think about that, what we've talked about in this video, when you come back in the fall.
I've been trying to bend the rules since I barely was walking.